Please join us in welcoming to the stage Dan Burgar, Nonny de la Peña, Cortney Harding, and Ashley Crowder.
Thank you so much. I'm Dan Burgar. I'm the CEO of Frontier Collective, and we're really focused on the intersection of frontier technology, VR, AR, Metaverse, AI, clean tech, and robotics in Vancouver, and really pushing Vancouver as a global leader in VR, AR, and all of these frontier technologies and innovation. I'm also the co-founder of Shape Immersive, and we build 3D products for retailers and big brands. So we're going to start off with a few questions and really getting everyone to introduce themselves and get acquainted with the audience. So if you guys can start with quick intros. Ashley, go ahead.
Sure. I'm Ashley Crowder. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ventana. I've worked in the immersive XR space for over a decade, so excited that Metaverse became a buzzword. And Ventana is a 3D content management system. We make it incredibly easy to manage and distribute 3D assets everywhere you need for clients like Hugo Boss to drill quit. So all types.
Nonny.
Hi, I'm Nonny de la Peña. I'm probably best known for having pioneered the use of virtual and augmented reality for journalism, coined the term immersive journalism, and then went on to have like the first VR piece at Sundance and Tribeca, and apparently here too. But in any case, now I'm wearing a couple of really fun hats besides continuing to make content. In journalistic content, I've also just launched a beta of a button-based WebXR software for anybody and everybody to be able to make immersive content without knowing how to code. And it exports into a file format known as the GLB or GLTF, which then allows you to take your own space and bring it into any virtual world that you want, any metaverse that you want. So it allows you to have interoperability and own your own content. And the last note is I've just taken a job at Arizona State University, and in downtown Los Angeles, we've created a new center on narrative and emerging media, including a really cool graduate program, a lab, a haptics lab, research center, event space, and I invite everybody to come to downtown LA and check us out.
I'm Cortney Harding. I'm the founder and CEO of a VR, AR, and Metaverse agency called Friends with Holograms. We build virtual and augmented reality projects and consult on Metaverse applications for large companies. Our focus is very much on using these technologies for social impact and change. And like everyone else on this panel, I wear multiple hats. So I also teach, I write, I speak, and this is an incredible full circle moment for me because in 2016, I was brand new to the space. I was on a panel. I met on that panel the person who would then give me my first job in the space. And I also saw Noni's piece on Planned Parenthood across the line at that event, and now I'm on a panel with her all these years later. So it's a really, really cool way how everything has come full circle in the past several years at this event.
Wow, that's amazing. Love the serendipity of South by Southwest and how it really brings different types of people together from different backgrounds, and really excited to be here with you guys. And so I want to get started, and just some housekeeping notes. Basically, if you guys have questions and questions that you want to raise to the panelists, please go to the South by Southwest Go app and engage on the event page. So we'll be doing about 15 minutes of Q&A afterwards. So I want to start us off with really kind of defining the metaverse and really looking at where are we at with this industry and how it's going to affect so many other industries. And I'm going to start with a quote from Matthew Ball, and he defines it so well. It is a massively scaled and interoperable network of real-time rendered 3D virtual worlds that can be experienced synchronously and persistently by effectively unlimited numbers of users, each with an individual sense of presence. Cortney, can you maybe tap into that and help us understand what the metaverse is and where we're at?
I can try. Yeah, I mean, I think that definition is pretty right on. The way that I define it is it's driven by embodied avatars and voice. So those are the two really key things for me that make the metaverse as opposed to the current iteration of the internet, right? The metaverse is just the next iteration of the web and of how we communicate. But I think that it is, again, switching from embodiment, switching to embodiment, switching to voice, rather than this kind of like mediated by a screen, video, text-based communication way that we have right now. And yeah, it's a really nascent time. It's a really exciting time, but I think, clearly it's already here. I think anyone who says the metaverse isn't here yet is just incorrect, right? The metaverse is not finished yet. The metaverse will never be finished unless like humanity is finished, right? We're constantly creating, iterating, changing things, just like the internet did not end with GeoCities, although sometimes I wish it had, right? So I think we're consistently building, but the metaverse is absolutely here right now and something to be very interested in.
Ashley?
Yeah, I have a slightly different definition, but I love the way you put it. But I think about it more as we just now can have volumetric and 3D content on the web. And so this doesn't have to be headset only based, which I think people think of a lot, but it's just, I can go on a website and walk through a world and see things, in 3D space. Or I can hold up my phone and place that virtual couch in my living room. That's part of the metaverse. It's just, the internet's now volumetric. And when I work with lots of brands and talk to them of just when mobile came out and your website wasn't mobile ready, that was okay. Now you're dead in the water, right? And being prepared for this volumetric 3D spatial internet, it's going to be here before you know it, and it already is here, and leaders in the space are already doing this. So it's, I agree with you. It's here.
I agree. Nonny, can you tell us about some of the content creation that's happening in the metaverse and how we'll be able to tell new stories through the medium? You've been doing this for decades. Are we at this place where people want to consume content in the metaverse?
Well, I think, the biggest problem, and I think for all of us here, and especially it's been one of the pain points, has been the friction, right? The friction of actually getting access to these spatial experiences. And what's really amazing is how fast we're seeing the ability now to just use whatever you want, computer, phone, headset, to experience, basically, our world isn't flat, right? I mean, there's nothing around you is flat. Your story shouldn't have to stay flat. Mm. And this is what the metaverse allows. Now, I was an early user of Second Life, but I remember when a bunch of advertisers jumped in and they would just give you here's a 3D model of a Coca-Cola, everybody's going to buy it. Well, no, they didn't. And that was really like a revelation. And all the advertisers were like, this isn't ready. Well, had they given you an experience, I'm going to float up like a bubble to the top, and then I'm going to pop and be flown out of this glass. I'm like that, that's the metaverse. That's the multiverse, that sense that there's an experience that's got dimension. And that really, when you start thinking about, how is money going to flow? Well, it's going to flow, and it's going to be something that has an experiential value.
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of brands starting to get into the metaverse. They're unveiling strategies on why they want to invest in it, but we're seeing a lot of really shitty stuff out there. And we need to kind of look at this differently as like a pathway for many, many years, not just a shiny object. Cortney, can you tell me a bit about what you're working on and how you're helping some of the brands kind of define their strategy?
Yeah, so a lot of brands right now are doing this thing where they just are taking whatever they are doing in other mediums and porting it into the metaverse. So I see a lot of clothing brands who are like, we're going to put a store in the metaverse.
Just like I said.
Which is not bad necessarily. It's just kind of pointless. It's like, why? What's the point of this, right? So I think where brands mostly fail is A, they're not creative enough, they're not imaginative enough, they're just taking kind of their IRL experience and slapping it in the metaverse and expecting people to be interested. And B, they don't build community. They don't give people a reason to come back. Like, people have so many other things they could be doing, right? Why would I spend time in a metaverse world that is just kind of an extension of the real world when I could be doing something else. And I think the brands that do it successfully, like Nike is one of them. Nike has built a Roblox world that is well attended, and it's really well curated. It's well done, and it is highly, highly resourced. It's a priority for them, and they've seen that really pay off. Or like Black Rock City VR, which is one of my favorite worlds in the metaverse. What they did was so smart was they took everything good about Burning Man, right? The art and the culture and the communities and the camps. They stripped out everything that was bad about Burning Man, which is like, it's expensive, everyone smells terrible, and most people are high and kind of annoying. And then they added like that you can fly, which you can do in the metaverse. You can fly, you can be a rabbit, you can be a cat, you can be whatever you want. And that was beautiful. That was like a perfect example of how you take what's good, strip out what's bad, and then you add the magic, right? And very few brands are grasping that yet. And so what I'm trying to do with the brands that I work with is push them to be like, what else can you do? And how else can you build community? And what reasons can you give people for wanting to do this rather than any of the 10 million other things they could be doing with their time? And I think we're, again, right at the cusp of people kind of figuring it out. And it'll take time, obviously, this always does. But I do think like once more people start to really grasp it and get it, we're gonna see a lot of cool stuff happen.
Ashley.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's about building that community. I mean, you wouldn't do one post on Instagram and say you have an Instagram strategy, but that's what a lot of brands are doing in the metaverse right now, right? And you know, not everybody has the budget Nike has to build a whole Roblox world, but iHeartMedia built a world in Roblox, which is amazing, and they have curated content throughout the year. So they've done that hard job for you, giving people a reason to come back. And so if you're a brand, you could actually buy some brand sponsorship or do a collab with them within their space, which is a great way to get into it. And then when we're working with brands, we're talking about the entire life cycle of a product. So everyone gets so excited about these consumer experiences, which are fun and exciting, but we're working with brands in the design and development, and they're actually using 3D to replace physical samples. So we have a client who saved $100,000 per season and reduced carbon footprint by 4.4 tons per season by fully replacing physical samples with 3D. And that can be 3D on the web. Some are using virtual worlds to create, virtual showrooms to sell to Nordstrom's and Bloomingdale's, which it's all really exciting. And then we've had other clients doing this increased speed to market by a whole month. So there are all these things happening in the background with people utilizing these technologies for design, development, and B2B sales as well, which are showing value to the bottom line. So, if you're talking to your boss or anyone, it's like, this is real value today that you can explain that's going to help your company and prepare you for that consumer-facing experience that you eventually might do in the metaverse.
The other part of it that interests me a lot is this idea of what's the authentication in the metaverse. I'm actually going to be hosting a conference on that this spring. When we start thinking about the blockchain as a place in which we can establish some sort of provenance, right? And if everybody's got a phone now a smartphone where they can make dimensionalized spaces, right? You can scan anything and bring that into, that's what we're using it, my platform at tried-outreach.love. It allows you to bring your own stuff in, your own space, build it, and then take it out with you. But then, for example, when the International Court of Human Rights wants to prosecute war crimes in Ukraine, right? How are they going to do that? How are we going to authenticate these spaces that are going to be brought into full dimensional courtroom environments? And what does that mean for the metaverse as well? So there's both the, thinking about like, okay, an NFT obviously is meant to have a certain kind of provenance and a way for artists and musicians and everyone else to be able to, retain a certain amount of control of their products, but also when we start replicating our real world into the virtual world, what is it going to mean to seek out truth there?
Do you believe VR is the empathy engine?
If you ask me, yes. For a while there when I was first saying that, I was like, not so much. Well, actually, initially I was like, wow, this is crazy. Then there was a lot of attack and pushback on it because the idea that you just put on a headset and you feel empathy. No. you've got to do good storytelling. But I would say, having worked in print and film and AR and VR, I do think that by putting people on scene in real stories where they can walk around and experience it firsthand is a very unique path for people to connect to what's happening all around them. And now I'm back to feeling like I will say, when the storytelling is good, it's a very unique medium for telling truth.
Yeah, I would agree with that because a lot of the work that we've done is actually putting people in situations that are uncomfortable or unpleasant. And that's the goal of it. So we built a piece on workplace inclusion where you put in the headset, you come as yourself, right? My fundamental belief is that you can't just cosplay in VR and have the same impact, right? I can't undo 40 odd years of being myself just by putting on a headset. But what I can do is put myself in an experience I've never experienced before as myself and feel profoundly what it is like to experience that. So we did this workplace inclusion piece, and we were putting people through who are sort of in the dominant cohort, and they'd never felt excluded before. And the reaction they had was incredibly powerful. People were angry and people were frustrated, and it was really moving for them. And that spurred them to take action, to change the way they ran their meetings, to change the way they ran their workplaces. And that's really where this stuff is incredibly powerful. In the metaverse, the broader metaverse, right, there was a great experiment that a company did where they invited 10 people from every level, from C-suite down to interns. Everyone was anonymized as a rabbit character. Everyone was numbered randomly. And everyone's voice was disguised, so you sounded like you were in witness protection. And then they did a brainstorming session, and what was amazing was the interns, the young folks, came up with these incredible ideas they never would have had the confidence or the opportunity to present to the leadership. And just, it stripped out every sort of level and every sort of hierarchy, and it allowed people to just collaborate in a brand new way that we've never experienced before.
Over the past year, we've seen so much hype, a lot of buzzwords being flown around. And how do we make sure that this new wave isn't really about the hype and it's more authentic? Cortney, can you kind of dig into that?
I don't think we can, but I don't think we don't have to, right? I used to drive myself nuts reading press about the metaverse, and finally I was like, you know what, forget it. This is just a waste of my time. There's a lot of amazing journalists out there. There's a lot of journalists out there that are just trying to get clickbait. So a couple of people sent me this article recently that was Meta is over the metaverse. And it was just yeah, Meta just revealed their 4-year roadmap, dude. And the other thing that I see a lot, which drives me insane, and please, if you walk away from this with one thing, there's this meme that circulates on LinkedIn all the time that's it's the kids in the swimming pool, and it's AI is the kid with the mom, and the metaverse is the one drowning, and NFTs are at the bottom of the ocean. And I was like, it's not a competition. That's not competition. It's you can, Cardi B said, you can have more than one lady rapper. They don't have to compete. They can just be friends and both be good rappers, right? There can be multiple technologies all doing well at once. And this, attitude that everything has to be winning or losing or up or down. I'm just God, this is so binary and so stupid and so boring, and I really hate it. So please just don't do that. Just be here's this amazing new stuff. If you're into it, cool. If it's not your cup of tea, also cool. But just, I don't know. I don't pay attention to the tech press anymore. I just build stuff.
I totally agree with you. And I think at the end of the day, money talks, sadly, whether we like that or not, right? And there was over $50 billion spent on digital goods in games last year. So if you're a brand and you're thinking, should I have a digital presence? Yes, you need to. Kids are going to meet in Roblox and Fortnite. They're not going to meet at the mall anymore. And if you don't have a presence there, in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to be forgotten by this up and coming generation. So, at the end of the day, the consumers are telling us that they like this and they want this. And there's real value as a company to, again, we're seeing manufacturers increase speed to market by a month, which is massive. And just learnings that you would never have. We have a different client who launched 3D on their e-com site, and consumers were zooming into totally different parts of the product than they thought they cared about. So it completely changed their way they photograph everything and changed all their photography on the website. So, this is whether it's VR or AR or just 3D on the web, it's providing real value to people, whether that's building these empathetic experiences or just, helping get to market faster.
Nonny?
Oh, I was just thinking, about, there's one or two questions in front of us. And the reason I'm going to answer one of them to them now is because I feel like we're so soaked in this world that we're talking about that sometimes I realize that maybe not everybody, I had to take a step back when I see there are a couple people asking about cost and how do you start. And I realized, well, maybe we should take a step back and really try to provide some practical aspects for people to engage in this space. There are a number of companies out there that are creating these, what I almost want to say multiverse. It actually feels better to me now these days in Metaverse in some ways, because it can be interconnected. So if you want to just have a meeting, right, together, if you want your own little private one, yes, you can hire an engineer and get Unity to provide a little space. You can use a Unity game where you can go and meet. But you could also use beyond the big tools like Roblox or, like a Fortnite gathering, you can go into spatial.io and gather there immediately. You can go into Mozilla Hubs. You can go into Nowhere. You can go into, I heard a new one yesterday that looked great, but the point is that those are spaces you can gather. Well, now how do you build the space that you want to have? They're offering some tools, but that's why I also designed Reach, was to make it really easy for you. You can go to try.reach.love. It's all button-based. You don't have to code. You can gather great stuff like, Ashley's the one who pushed me to do GLB and GLTFs to let people do their own worlds. So once you're done making your little world, you can bring it into one of those sites or all those sites, which is really nice. So you don't have to feel like, oh, I have to go to Meta. Like Meta is just, unfortunately, it's sort of a distraction. It's like it kind of gives people a feeling of a deer in the headlights. Just ignore it. There's so many other cool places you can work. So don't get caught up in all the hype around that, right?
Yeah, well, to your point, like you wouldn't go build a website from scratch, right? You'd go to Wix or Squarespace or whatever, and spatial.io and Reach, and there's all these great platforms out there for that. If you are a product-based company, you do need 3D models, and just kind of touch on that for a minute. GLB is quickly becoming the standard, the JPEG of 3D. I'm part of the Kronos Group, which is a nonprofit pushing for standards in 3D on the web to make this easier for people, so you're not building a 3D asset for each end use case that you're trying to go to. So things are interoperable, which is key to making the metaverse attainable for everybody. But there's multiple ways you can do it. You do want to make sure you're building with real-time ready materials, and you're building that asset from the beginning for real time, because then you can take it everywhere. And so that's something, at Ventana, our whole mission is to democratize 3D and make it easy to take a 3D asset and bring it anywhere you want. Because that is what's going to enable this for everybody.
Yeah, I think we kind of need to have a discussion about like basic definitions, right? Because I'm looking at this one question that's in front of me. How much does it typically, sorry, Dan, I think we just kind of went a little bit off the rails, but how much does it typically cost to create a metaverse? Are there any companies you recommend for startups? Which is like a great, legitimate question, but I think that we need to like discuss what that means. What does it cost to create a metaverse? If you want to build like a platform, that costs a lot of money. If you want to build a competitor to a Spatial or a Horizon Worlds or a, whatever, like that's a significant chunk of change. That's a whole new product, right? But if you want to just build a metaverse world, which I'm guessing this question is alluding to that more than the latter, right? Or the former, sorry. It's free. Like if you go on Spatial, which I don't think any of us work for Spatial, but we all really like it and I use it. Like I'm teaching a class at Barnard in New York City this semester about building a diverse and inclusive metaverse, and all my students are using Spatial to build their worlds. And Spatial is free. There's a $25 premium version, $25 a month premium version, which is like pretty dang affordable. There's like Unity plugins. There's all sorts of great things you can do. There are other worlds that are more technical, right? So I think just that question is really good because it illustrates like the fact that we need to be communicating a lot more clearly about this, because I think a lot of people think like, oh, this is,
Meta.
Well, and again, like Meta is one of my clients, so I think Meta is doing a lot of really interesting stuff, but there's a barrier to entry with some companies that others don't have. Some cost more, some cost less. But I think that regardless, like, we need to be talking about, the metaverse is accessible to everyone today, right now. You don't need a headset, although I think it's better in headset. You don't need a headset. You don't need a lot of startup capital. Like, you could all take out your phones right now, create spatial accounts. We could build a world together. Like, that could be how we spend our next 35 minutes. We won't, but we could. And like, that's it. That's all you need. So I think we kind of unnecessarily complicate this stuff.
But I'm going to back up for 1 second. If you want to do a replica of the real world, right, which is not something you're going to see in spatial or yet.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that I focused on with Reach, has been you can use your phone and you can use something called, if you don't know, Polycam or Scaniverse. Those are super great tools that they're apps that let you take your phone, and once again, you can export it as a GLTF or a GLB. So if you were taking anything away from these panels, is these kind of tools means that you can make your own, multiverse place where you can gather, whether it's with your colleagues or your friends or your family, and bring them into places and interconnect them. And they're just web links. They're just URLs. So this is just the internet, but with dimension. It's trying to bring us closer to the way that we really operate.
I want to zoom out a little bit and kind of get into augmented reality. How is augmented reality going to play into our lives in the next 3 to 5 years? Is Apple, they're going to be releasing a VR AR headset this year. Is that going to change the game, Ashley?
Yes, I hope it actually finally gets. We've all been like talking about this rumor for years. Apple just does consumer products better than most people. I think it will be a huge step forward in the adoption. But that said, you can do AR with your phone, and shopping is the first. Like, how big is that couch in my living room? IKEA was the first to really pioneer this, and it helps. It helps people make that purchase. Google's starting to enable 3D and AR on Google search. So we've been working with them to auto-publish 3D assets to Google search. So it's click of a button. Again, easy. You don't need to do anything. And Google has said they believe the future of shopping is 3D and AR because it gives consumers such a better understanding. Amazon's also started launching 3D and AR. So once either of those big behemoths make this open to everyone in a standard, it's going to be everywhere very quickly. Because if your competitor's beating you on SEO and Google because they have 3D models, you're going to start doing that, right? And that's, again, just all with your computer and your phone. But yes, I think Apple, and I'm super excited to see what headset they come up with, because I think it's going to be, way better than the original Google Glass, which didn't pan out. But
I did this kind of funny podcast with BMW and their AI, AR car. The car was interviewed me. Their AI interviewed me, and the idea being that all of your cars, your windscreens, right? You're going to get in, and it's going to be completely AR enabled, and so that your map will just be there in front of you. It'll take you places. It'll provide weather. It'll provide everything. Your car is going to become an AR machine. You don't even have to put on glasses, and that I think is in the nearer roadmap rather than later.
But I want to talk about one thing that concerns me about the AR glasses, which I think are great, and I'm so excited. I think brands in particular are going to overcomplicate these, and here's what I mean. So I just praised Nike a minute ago for their Roblox World, which I do love, but I'm going to criticize Nike a little bit because they built an AR glasses application recently, and they built it for runners, I'm a runner, and they built it in my neighborhood, so I was like, this rules. I'm excited to check this out, and it was so silly and so useless. So like you could see a visualization of like, here's a dragon and here's a this and here's a that. And I was like, I want to see directions. I want to see data related to my run. Like, I don't care about like some funny little, this billboard came to life. I'm like, what's my pace? Where do I turn next? What's my heart rate? Like,
where's the nearest bathroom?
Where's the nearest bathroom? I have a Google map just for that, right? Like, where's the nearest Starbucks so I can go to the restroom, right? And so I think one thing, the AR glasses are so exciting. I'm really, really thrilled. I can't wait to slap them on my face and walk around. But I just, let's not get too crazy before we get to the basics and nail the basics. And it sounds like what BMW has is they're kind of nailing the basics, right? You want that map in front of you. So that's my one kind of big caution to brands that are interested in that space is like, don't do kooky stuff before you do the meat and potato stuff.
Yeah, Ashley.
We're contradicting ourselves, I know, because we said we also don't just want a Coke can in the metaverse. You gotta make me fly. So yeah, you need to do like some market research testing. There, there's a spectrum, I guess.
Yeah.
So I just started working with the city of Los Angeles. They've got the person who's head of innovation comes from NASA, and LA is just suddenly all in and immersive. And here's a funny little backstory: is that. How many people here remember the movie Towering Inferno? I know it's a long time ago from the 1970s. It's like these people all get trapped in a big high-rise and it's burning, fire, blah, blah, blah. So some councilman back when that movie came out decided that every building in Los Angeles going to be built had to have a helipad so that you could escape, right? But the amazing thing about all these helipads is that LA then has all this area for drones and drone flying and therefore even better GIS capture and using the NASA layers and capture through drones that can be safely flown and landed. They're planning to create an immersive overlay of the city par excellence for the Olympics. And they are hiring 5,000 to 6,000 people to work on this immersive endeavor. So I think LA is about to be transformed by this AR overlay. And I'm super excited that we're just starting this whole project.
That's so cool.
Courtney?
No, that's super cool. I mean, that's thrilling. And it's cool to see cities and sort of, like, you wouldn't normally think of a city bureaucracy being that innovative and forward-thinking, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, she's in charge of budgets, too. So, like, to be the innovator and in charge of budgets, you think it might actually happen.
If only.
Ashley, how important is utility in the 3D web, in the metaverse, VR, AR?
So much. And I feel like so often people build something and then go and try and find a problem that they can solve. And it's like it needs to be the opposite. And so, just touching on, I can give a few examples of really great utility of this technology. So, years ago, we worked with a space company who, when they build these composite parts, there's a manual piece where you have people packing on a layer of this really expensive material. And they were kind of just guessing and then sanding down. And so it was a huge cost. And on top of that, you don't want to be guessing with any part of a spacecraft because it's very scary. And so this was about 7 years ago, but we said, okay, well, you have 3D models for manufacturing of this. And we took, put it into like a game engine, and then we used projection mapping. And so as they were adding the material, it was green. And as they got closer to where it should be, it turned yellow. And then when they hit exactly the right layer, it turned red to like stop. So it seems like a pretty simple, when you step back, application of augmented reality, but saved them tons of money and made more accurate parts, which were safer, required less testing and redoing. And so that was a great application. And then for what we're doing, it's all about how do you make these 3D models interoperable to be used in more use cases like that.
Courtney.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point is everything needs a reason, right? And whether the reason is something like Ashley's use case, which is fantastic and so useful and so straightforward, or whether it's something like Burning Man VR, which, that's a nice to have, that's a luxury, but there's a point to the experience, right?
Oh, art's not a luxury. Art is not a luxury. Sorry.
No, well, no.
I'm
It's not.
I'm teasing, right?
But it's like it's not work related, I guess, is what I'm saying, right? You could hang out in the Burning Man VR experience, or you could go to the movies or go to an art museum, right? It's not the thing that you have to do, right, for your job. It is a thing that you do as a leisure activity, which you enjoy, but you have other options. I guess that's how it kind of delineated. But the point is there needs to be a point, right? And I think where a lot of people are sort of flailing in the space a little bit is they are building things that don't have points. And the point can be like building a better spaceship, which is a really important point. And the point can also be building a beautiful space to spend time with your friends and be in community. But you need to kind of delineate what that point is before you start, because I've seen brands do this where they build something that looks really cool and they get a nice ad week article and isn't it exciting, and then it's this kind of digital wasteland after a week because they built something that nobody came to because there was no reason for them to come.
The reason why I say the artist, the reason why I mean, forgive me, it just touched a sensitive space to me for right now, which is that, we've talked about STEM, and then we finally went, oh, STEAM will add arts. But lately I've been saying, and STEAM, we need the humanities, because as people build these worlds, we need to be thinking about the nature of humanity that is above and beyond just the idea of, our universities are only, centered around the engineering schools. We need to be thinking bigger, larger, and more connected with each other. Yes. And I'm hoping, once again, that we have as much reflection on that as we can as we start to build out, whether it's multiverses or the metaverse.
Ashley, how important is it for diversity and inclusion in this new industry? And how can we do a better job of including everyone and having everyone sit at the table? How do we want to approach that? Is it all just tech bros, or can we just shift the culture here?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important. I mean, it's taken, the movie industry was started by a bunch of white men, and it's taken a really long time to start to see diversity in that industry. We've had to fight for it. We're building this new virtual world from the ground up. And it's such an amazing opportunity to have everyone from every aspect of life be a part of that building, which is so important. I mean, when voice activation first came out, it still doesn't really work well for me because it was built mostly by men, and men's voices have a different pitch, and it hears that pitch better because that was the testing that was done, right? And it's just it wasn't malicious in any way. It just was like that was what the testers were, and so I think it's so important, and it's a huge issue to tackle. I think it starts with having more women investors who can invest in a more diverse group of startups who are building different things, and not just women, but also people of color. I think women of color are the most restricted in how much VC funding they get. And that affects what we build or what we can build. And so, I think it's a huge opportunity. And, companies like Meta, they do have a fund and are funding different content creation, which I, commend. I think that's great. Epic has Epic Mega Grants as well. So, I hope they're looking at the diversity of who they're giving those out to. We got one, so good job. We're one woman-founded company.
Actually, when I leave a message for people and I go, "Hi, it's Nonny," literally that "Hi," you know what? It's actually the same tone as hitting the pound button, and I really have had to train myself to go, "Hello," because if I just say my normal voice, it is literally the same tone. And often in the old days, if you hit pound, it would take you off into some crazy phone tree thing, right? I mean, so just give you an exact example of what Ashley's talking about.
Cortney.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to create a diverse and inclusive space is just hire people and pay them. That's, and obviously you want to make them feel comfortable, welcome. You don't want to, make them work and be paid in a space that is not conducive to their growth and their comfort. But that's kind of it, right? We all watch Silicon Valley Bank kind of explode and implode, and a bunch of bro VCs in a group chat do a bank run. Okay, that was a weird weekend. That was a weird 62 hours or however long that took. But I think what really came out of that for me was the lack of diversity in sort of that space was really so horrifying to me. And I was like, God, even now in 2023, it's that group of people, right? And again, it's we can talk, I see so many programs mentoring women and helping women and da-da-da. I'm I don't need a mentor. I need a paycheck.
You need investment. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I completely agree. It's one reason why I took the position at Arizona State University, because I would bring in interns and train them. I mean, some amazing people Idris Brewster was my intern. He's now got a big piece at MoMA, big AR piece at MoMA. So these amazing people just needed a little bit of space, but I couldn't scale that.
Yeah.
So I took the job at Arizona State University so I could actually create a whole graduate center and personally bring in cohorts of students who would be able to go out as not, beginning, but directors and producers, be able to be trained to go out there and take these middle level, at least management jobs and creating creative jobs, and we could begin to diversify the monoculture. And that was my reason why I decided to take on another hat. But I love it there. I just love it. I love what we're doing. And crazily enough, it's got a STEM designation, which means if you come to get my master's, if you're from international, you get a 3-year visa afterwards. So just saying, there's some benefits.
But yeah, and sorry, I feel like I keep bringing it back to money, but to be successful, women are 50% of the population, and we are more and more of a diverse world. Like if you're trying to build something with community, which is going to make your metaverse successful, you need to approach, all the different groups. I watched Allison Felix speak yesterday, which was great. Olympic runner, founder of Seish Footwear, and she's like, yeah, we were pitching to VCs, and they were like, is the market big enough? And she's like, we're 50% of the population. Yes, it's big enough. Women's shoes. So I think, I bring it, it's about, hiring diverse, investing diverse, but it's not a charity. It's like, this will make you more money if you're an investor. So, and
it's also not, it's also not about making people who are not engineers second-class citizens, right? Like there's a lot of amazing engineers, but I've seen a lot of engineers who just think that everyone that's not in their world is an idiot. And that is just horrifying to me. Like, you need creatives, you need strategists, you need people to do all these other things. And I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said, oh, I really want to work in VR or the metaverse, but I don't know Unity. And I was like, I don't know Unity. I've learned a little bit just so I can talk to developers, but I couldn't build anything in Unity. But what I can do is come up with an idea and a strategy and lead creative and write a script and hire developers to build that for me, and we all work together as a team. And so I think there's just been this real sort of attitude over the last several years of like engineers above all else or STEM above all else. And it's like, no, we all need to be working together and building together, and we don't need any more dumb acronyms which is like STEAM. Like that's a liberal arts education. Just call it that.
Yeah, honestly.
Nonny, what sort of new careers will you see in the metaverse? Zooming out, like building for the metaverse and then going inside the metaverse, what kind of careers will be built for this new paradigm shift?
Well, listen, in 2006, they put people in 2 cohorts, and they looked at a 3D model of an ear. And they had, part of the group had the 3D model of the ear, part of the people had the flat. And the people who had the 3D model, on average, did 83% better than the people who did not have the 3D model of the ear. So when you first immediately start to say, okay, our real world has dimension, the way people are going to think and approach, so it's education and medical and real estate and fashion and kind of everything, is where we're going with this. And so I don't think that there's any career that isn't going to be touched by this move from flat 2D to a representation of the world with dimension. And then you get these overlays of things you can only do in virtual worlds, like you were describing, like flying or they're just super powering. And I actually built a piece in Second Life where I let you reproduce all these artists' work, performances, who did things to get over borders, like a guy who shot himself from a cannon over the Mexico-U.S. border, a guy who did a skateboard flip over the Great Wall of China. I mean, you can't get to do that in the real world, but you can do it virtually. So there's lots of fun things too. And of course, games. Jesus, we all know games are eating Hollywood's lunch. So,
Cortney.
I mean, I just remember, so I was a journalist before I did whatever it is I do now, and back in the sort of early to mid 2000s, there were kind of online journalists and print journalists, right? That designation has largely disappeared at this point. Everyone's just a journalist. And I think at a certain point, it's not going to be like, I'm a metaverse community manager. It's just you're a community manager. That's a skill that I think is going to be hugely important. That's a skill that right now is coded as female. It's coded as sort of young. It's underpaid. And that's BS, and that needs to change. And I think like you can be a community manager on the internet right now. Those skills are completely transferable into the metaverse, right? So I think that almost any skill you have in this day and age is going to move into the metaverse. And I think that that's just, you know, we're not going to have these weird delineations anymore. I'm a community manager of a Twitter account. If you are, God bless. My condolences. Or, you know, or I'm a community manager in the metaverse. It's just like I'm a community manager. So yeah, I mean, Unity and Unreal are useful things to know if you're a developer. If that's what you're into, I very much encourage you to pursue that. But I think at a certain point, like with Web 1, where it was like, I work for an internet company. No one says that anymore. I kind of want to start saying it again. But, you know, these things, like the less that these things are sort of strange or not mainstream, the more they become just sort of like, oh, what do you do? I work at a startup. Oh, what do you do? I do a metaverse thing. So I think it'll just get normalized.
Ashley.
Yeah, I mean, you know, going back to kind of like the title of this is like, how do we build this sustainable metaverse economy? Is like we do need talent, but from all different areas. And I think within the fashion space, which I work a lot in, every fashion student is now graduating designing in 3D, which is pretty amazing. And certain companies, like Merrill, I work pretty close with, they have a mentorship program. So they pair the more senior, you know, designers who've been doing this for decades, who know how to build that amazing shoe that's going to feel good on your foot, but they've never touched a 3D design program, and they partner them with these new kids just right out of college, like their first job. And it's like a beautiful partnership because these kids get to learn from these seasoned designers, and then they're like, okay, and like, how does this 3D tool work? Teach me, you know, help me build this. And I think more companies need to be thinking about how they're going to upskill their workers. You know, just like when computers first came out, and if you didn't know how to type, that was a problem. But, you know, this is going to be in 3D design tools. If you were an architect, any company that designs and manufactures products has moved to 3D design. So we need to be thinking about how we're upskilling our workers. And then, you know, again, it's all about making that simple and easy and not scary, and only
Also,
engineers can do this.
At this point, one of the really important things for things to be sustainable is we've got to have the workforce behind this.
Yeah.
Right now we have water boards, we have power boards, we have ed boards. If anything COVID taught us, we need technology boards, because students who had access to technology and to the resources necessary to participate in this economy did okay, and it didn't matter what school district they were in. I mean, LA Unified, again, I'm going to go back to LA, they really worked hard at getting hotspots. T-Mobile donated a gazillion hotspots to all these kids, and they did, their scores were surprisingly good. So, you know, in what has been was a detrimental educational period, right? Mm-hmm. So when we talk about like, how do we make this sustainable? Well, you know, we've got to have a workforce for it. And the only way we're going to do that is if we treat technology with the same idea of it being as much of a basic right as water and power now.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into some questions right now, and we're going to take one from Joe Davis. What are your thoughts on the broader economic function in the metaverse beyond shopping? How do you see us earning, investing, lending, and borrowing? Start with you, Ashley.
So this might be controversial. I mean, everyone's like, oh, it's going to be all blockchain and crypto. And I was like, well, we've used credit cards to buy things on the internet for the past how many years, and that's been great. I trade on E-Trade easily. I don't think we necessarily have to like fully reinvent everything. Like we are able to do business virtually today. But, you know, blockchain has benefits. Obviously everything that happened this weekend, the decentralization, the fact that anybody could, have and own their own stuff, I think is amazing and brilliant. I also just am like, we don't need to like solve everything at once. Like your credit card could work in the metaverse too. So.
So when you deal with what the values of the blockchain, and I agree with Ashley, like it's like everything else, it's got to have this array. But I've been working with this guy, Jonathan Doughton, who has something called Starling Labs. And one of the things when I talk about authentication is he took a Holocaust survivor's video, put it on the blockchain. So now if anybody tries to make a deep fake of that Holocaust survivor, we have provenance for the original material. So when we, people really worry sometimes about these technologies, like, oh, are we going to have the president fake, deep fake, starting a nuclear war? Well, that's a kind of really good use case for provenance and blockchain, right? But I agree with Ashley, not everything has to be reinvented.
Yeah, exactly.
Cortney, how are we going to express ourselves in the metaverse? I feel like there's something new forming here, and we're going to have two sort of personalities, a real persona and our digital persona. What does life look like in the metaverse?
So I don't think that's the case. Like, I think what will happen is kind of what's happened with social media, where, I have, like, what I post on LinkedIn is not what I post on Twitter, nor what I post on Instagram. There's some overlap, and then there's some things that I sort of, am a little bit more professional on LinkedIn versus a little bit, snarkier and funnier on Twitter versus, like, I'll post photos of my friends on Instagram. And I think that will just continue through. So a lot of people talk about interoperability in the metaverse. I'm not necessarily opposed to having different worlds that you pop in and out of, right? Like, I'm happy to have a world where I go, and that's my world where I talk about music and art, and then I go to another world, and my avatar is more sort of my, like, buttoned-up day-to-day professional. And I think it's going to be kind of the same as we have right now, which is people are kind of switching off and on between personalities, and at the core, you're still yourself, and then you just sort of comport yourself in different ways depending on the audience and where you're at. And that's fine. I mean, humans have done that for a long time.
So back when I built the virtual Guantanamo Bay in Second Life, and I was working with some students at USC, I was bringing young women students to Second Life, and I decided to do a little study on sexual harassment and just seeing if, we know that in the real world, women find situations more sexually harassing than men have reported them. We certainly have seen that with trolling and texts. We know what happens to women reporters on Twitter all the time, blah, blah, blah. So I decided to track it for the virtual world. But when I gathered the data, I had this question about, what do you consider to be your real world gender? And there were a number of men who played women in Second Life, right? They had different personalities, but when we asked them about harassment, they had a statistically more significant reaction about being upset to being sexually harassed than women were, right? So this is this really interesting question about what is trolling like in these spaces. We know that this is a very important issue. We've seen this already where women go, oh my God, I'm on there for 5 minutes and I'm already being attacked. So that's, to me, one of the more interesting questions about like how our own spaces are protected, or how we protect our own spaces, and how we protect our own content, and how we create the space beyond who's making it, which will really help with inclusivity, but also how we're going to think about what an inclusive experience is in these spaces.
I also think on that sexual harassment front, like, obviously it's bad. I don't think anyone disagrees that it's bad. I don't think anyone disagrees that we should create, measures in the metaverse where people can be blocked or muted, or you have like a bubble around you that is sort of opt in or opt out. Absolutely. But like, at a certain point, the metaverse is people, right? We're people, and some people are scumbags. And that's just the unfortunate reality is like, yeah, have I been sexually harassed in the metaverse? Sure. Have I been sexually harassed, like, walking down the street? Yeah, all the time, right? Like, and the cool thing is in the metaverse, I can just mute someone, right? I can't mute the guy who's like sitting next to me on the bus doing what he shouldn't be doing, right? I went out for a drink by myself when I was in Milan the last time, and I literally could not sit for 2 minutes and read my book and have a drink without some guy coming up to me and getting in my face. So, and this is in real life, right? I had to scream at someone to finally get out of my face because I was sick of being harassed. And so I think that, yeah, we need to make sure that we have solves for this in the metaverse, but a lot of times we can actually solve this better in the metaverse than we can in real life, because unfortunately I can't mute these men, although I really wish I could.
Ashley, do you think we need guardrails?
I just love that you said, because it's not a metaverse problem. It's like a world problem. We can't fix everything. We're trying, I'm going to focus on the interoperability piece right now. But I think to your point, it is important if you are building a space, just like if you're, planning a real life event at South by, you want it to be great, right? So I think you should. But going back to this, question of how are you creating your persona in the metaverse? I think, Gen Z has multiple Instagram accounts because I want the Instagram account where I want to see road bikes and outdoor stuff. And then I have my other Instagram persona that's a different part of my personality. And I think that's awesome. And I think the fact that in the metaverse, I could parse my personality and create these different personas and have multiple identities is great. I think it's hard for a brand. How do you now talk to these people that are multiple personas and do that in an authentic way? It's a new hard problem to solve, but I think it's a positive, not a negative.
No, and the point I was making was that the metaverse might be an easier way to start thinking and training, so that maybe it'll be reflected back in the physical world.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things we've seen with some of the research around that, which is super cool. What we're looking at here is a moment just where we're excited, we're participating, but really all the tools are coming into everybody's hands. And when you talk about people who don't have access, there was, when I was first building, when the iPhone came out, and I was being told, oh, well, you've got to create a text-based, SMS-based content systems because most people don't have a smartphone. Well, then we saw what happened in Africa, where people just skipped over regular phones and went straight to smartphone for so much of their life. We're kind of at that cusp right now. The same thing, that this idea that this is just too expensive and inaccessible. If we don't start thinking about how to make good, accessible, inclusive content, train people to make the content themselves, try to help create what will be a market that's going to be sustainable. As this adoption occurs, we're going to miss another boat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Courtney, are we sort of at this pets.com kind of era right now in the metaverse? Are we kind of at this precipice of seeing new players develop?
I mean, I should get my sock puppet out. That's a reference for old people like me who remember the pets.com sock puppet. I mean, well, the pets.com sock puppet precipitated the crash of Web 1.0, right? So I hope we're not at that place, because that was pretty negative. But I think where we're at right now is, with a lot of these larger companies going through layoffs and sort of cutting interesting projects potentially because they're short-sighted or whatever, what that's going to do is enable a lot of people to go out and build really interesting new things. So, I don't think we're in danger of another internet bubble bursting like we were in 2000, 2001, although who knows. But I think we're at a place where people are going to start building really cool stuff who might not have built that stuff before because they had sort of big cushy jobs at a Google or a Meta or a Amazon or whatever, and now they're sort of incentivized to do something interesting and cutting edge that maybe they weren't enabled to do or allowed to do by their larger companies. So yeah, I think we're constantly in a stage of growth, and look, none of us are oracles. If we were, we would be on a crystal ball somewhere. But I think I can sort of definitely foresee a world where people start building really, really interesting stuff and building on what's already been built.
So just want to give a shout out to my student very quickly, because also in this inclusivity, he's got a piece here, one of my students, called Body of Mine, in which it's about body dysmorphia. So here's a piece specifically trying to use these technologies to help you understand body dysmorphia and experience it yourself. So if you go see Cameron Kostopoulos' piece at the Fairmont, I think you'll see the power of this medium. Please, Ashley, sorry.
No, yeah, that's amazing. And your students to be able to create this, because to your point, I think we're going to see a lot of amazing creators and new platforms disrupt, the companies that we know and use every day, because the technology is there. We have cloud computing. You can spin up however many computers you need really quickly, whether that's GCP, AWS, Azure. You can use your smartphone to create a 3D scan of your asset. You can upload that into a free world like spatial.io. We have 5G that can now enable fast loading assets and content. We're at this point where we have so many tools available to us. So we are going to see some, up and coming companies, all, Ventana being one, but.
There's one guy, with Alex Harvey, you should check out his work, but we had this workshop that I was lucky enough to have people like Gina Belfonte in. But anyway, my friend out in the audience, and he just took like his Lego creation, he scanned it and put it up on Sketchfab and sold it for $15. So like, that's talk about like, that's what you can do. Like if you've got that in your pocket, you can start making your models and selling them today. Like now, you could go out right now, download that app, scan this auditorium, and put it up there if somebody needs it for their build, their world, their game, their whatever, and you can sell it. I mean, like that is where we're at. There is room for. One of the biggest takeaways I hope that we can get through or whatever when we talk about diversity and inclusion is to get out of this idea of scarcity. That there's only these kind of jobs. It's actually this real abundance if we decide our world is big enough that we can feel that there's room for all of us. Let's try to change our mentality.
So we have 1 minute left, so we'll end off the panel with your guys' viewpoint of where this is all headed, and in the next 3 to 5 years, where are we going to be at? Ashley, we'll start with you.
I'm always coming at it from the companies that we work with, but we are going to start to see more and more 3D and AR everywhere on the web, from e-commerce to training materials, and using it to, instead of a car manual, right? You're just going to open up the app and scan, how to change a tire, which some companies have already done, but it's just going to become the standard. I think we are going to see better glasses and headsets potentially from Apple, which will become more normalized. But I think the phone is going to be our main computing power for a long time. But we're just going to see more 3D and volumetric content on every website that we go to.
Nonny.
I'm also really interested, beyond edge computing and be able to not have to wear the data on you. Hopefully we'll see a lot more streaming of the data. But I'm also really interested in sound haptics. Like what is that going to mean when you can, there's a lot of sound we can't hear, but we can feel. So I'm really interested in 3 to 5 years what kind of frictionless haptics we're going to have.
Cortney.
I think in 3 to 5 years, this will be just much more normalized. Like, I don't think that, I like doing panels on the metaverse. I have done many of them and I enjoy them very much. But I think at a certain point, we don't do panels on the internet as much anymore because it's not a new thing. It's just a thing that we visit every day and are very involved with. So I think this will just be more normalized. And this is where Gen Z is going to really lead the way, is like, these kids are already in Roblox. They're very invested in this. This is their normal. Right? This is fully their normal. And as they grow up, they go to school, they get into the workforce, maybe some of them go to college, some go straight to the workforce, but everyone's going to go into the workforce at some point. If you're a company and you think you can give a Gen Z person like a book or a video to watch and that will move the needle with them, like, you are sorely mistaken, my friend. So it's going to be normal. Like, it's a thing that's happening. It's a thing that's going to be normal. And that's kind of it.
So the last of the Metaverse panels.
These are fun.
And with that, we're done. And thank you so much for joining us, and really honored to be on this panel.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.